Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston Sports Podcast, part of the National Bleav Network. And joining me is our friend and Texans Analyst Garrett Williams, the man behind Houston Stressins. You can find him on YouTube, X, IG, TikTok, just about everywhere. And Garrett, I know you got to be excited about Texans Camp opening because, I mean, you've seen a bunch of these, and I just kind of curious, how does your excitement level compare to other Texan season, concerning the coach, the QB, and the level of talent on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, I'm very excited. You know, it's slowly ramping up more and more. And I've been telling people, you know, just online and on my live streams that the expectations and hype that we had last year, I feel like is what it should be for this year. You know, I really feel like we were overhyped by people like myself, fans and pundits last year. And as a result, I feel like many people maybe have an emotional sense of being burned and overreact. And maybe now we're underhyped, which is actually better, you know, for the teams and fans. But I think that this year is a legitimate year for us to be a legitimate contender. With that being said, like you mentioned, the changes, new additions through the draft and free agency, and obviously a new coordinator, I am very excited.
In your mind, what was the biggest camp storyline from day one?
I guess, I mean, it's probably going to be the biggest story the whole time is the O-line, and it being yet another combination that I don't even know that we've seen. And again, it's going to change day to day. I do like the approach that we saw in minicamp and OTAs, where some fans saw it as a negative. I saw it as a big positive in the fact that Nick Caley tried a variety of different lineups, guys at different spots. You know, some would argue, well, you need guys to know certain spots. But, you know, while it's early, especially in the spring and maybe early in training camp, I think it's a good time to get guys experience at different spots. And then also for you to evaluate them to see what they can and can't do. Whereas in years past, we've had to do that later in the year, and we didn't really try it prior. So now you got guys trying things last second. So you're kind of getting ahead of the curve in that sense. But back, I mean, to the original question and my original answer, the biggest story would be the O-line. You know, the configuration was Cam Robinson at left tackle. And then I Bleav it was also, I'm having a brain fart right now.
Yeah, no, it's Lakin Tomlinson, left guard, Jarrett Patterson, center, right guard.
Yes.
New Scruggs and Ursery at right tackle. And really the big story is Ursery at right tackle over Blake Fisher.
Yes, so there was that, and then also the center. Obviously, we knew Jake Andrews and Jarrett Patterson, you know, battling it out. But as we left off with OTAs, it seemed like Jake Andrews had the one up. But yeah, Ursery getting the ones. He did have some reps, you know, at times. But again, yeah, Blake Fisher seemed to be the guy at number one there. Obviously, Trent Brown is yet to be activated. I Bleav he's on the PUP list. You know, he can compete for that right tackle too. And was Juice Scruggs at right guard? It was Titus Howard at right guard, right? Obviously, he's kind of been the mainstay there. So, yeah, so that was surprising to me, was center and probably more so Ursery at right tackle. And I reserve judgment from saying who I should think play where right now because, one, I don't know, and I'm not at practice. I can't watch it. I can't see the film. And two, it's going to be ever-changing. So, but, yeah, it's exciting.
I feel like, you know, Jarrett Patterson shouldn't be a surprise. The surprise was what was going on during minicamp when it was Jake Andrews. I mean, I'm like, how is a guy that, you know, hadn't been with the team and was basically a non-factor last year and the year before, and somebody that was just out there, actually a bad pick by the Patriots when you look at it, because he was a guy they picked in the 4th round, and he was projected maybe to go in the 6th round. So that, to me, that was a big story. I mean, Jarrett Patterson deserves this because, I mean, look, Jarrett Patterson, when he's out there, CJ Stroud doesn't get hit. That's like the most important thing for the Texans.
Again, I don't know. Like I can't give you evaluation on, you know, Jake Andrews. Obviously, Jarrett Patterson, I think he's solid and underrated. You know, I thought he was probably the leader, but then just from, you know, watching the lineups being reported that came out in OTAs, and then honestly, I was kind of swayed a little bit, just learning more about him and watching the interview with him and Mark Vandermeer and Jon Harris, and I think he would at the very least have the initial leg up because of the familiarity with Cole Popovich. He was with him in college and also in New England, so he's familiar with the scheme and the verbiage and also like with the way he wants things done. So that's probably a big part of it. And then I walked away impressed. I know it's just talk from interview, but he seemed to have that mentality, the mindset, you know, the nastiness mindset that Denico wanted with these new alignmen. And so that kind of maybe swayed me a little bit. But regardless, the big thing that needs to be done correctly at center is communication, which we saw last year. Juice Scruggs started out there, and it's reported, and you can see in the games where there's, dead ball penalties that were a result of the center. And obviously last year too, the center was in charge of setting the protections, which was even a bigger deal last year. But this year it projects to where CJ will be involved in IDing the mic. But regardless, I think with Jake Andrews or Jarrett Patterson, honestly would feel happy with either. And the big thing is just getting guys lined up and getting things communicated, allowing the O-line a chance to even block. Last year, we were beat before we even had the play. It was all mental and not physical. I mean, mostly mental and not physical. So that's all I want from the center position right now.
The best low-key storyline for me was Brevin Jordan. He was a full go after tearing his ACL. The best thing for Stroud's health and the running game might be a tight end who's shown he can actually block somebody, Garrett.
Yes, that'll be huge. And yeah, that's a big story for me too. We have a lot of players, and you draft guys and sign guys, so you kind of forget about guys. But Brevin Jordan's a guy that we forget about, and he's someone that this staff, especially D'Amico Ryans, has praised repeatedly, unasked, this unprompted, on their own. And obviously they thought highly of him, extending him even with the injury going on. He's dynamic. And, they posted a clip earlier on the Texans main page. He seems to be moving pretty good. So, yeah, but blocking obviously is a big part of that. And a big reason why we struggled last year was the run game was atrocious and we were constantly behind the sticks. Easy way to solve that. A lot of those 3rd and longs and 2nd and longs and not being a known passing downs. And now, allowing your O-line and CJ Stroud a chance to try and get first downs is to run the ball. And yes, like you said, tight ends blocking in there will be huge, but also tight ends blocking the pass game. When I wrote an article about the Texans O-line and CJ Stroud and the pressures and who was responsible, I discovered one thing when I was breaking down, the amount of pressures that we had by position, and tight ends for us was the worst in the league. So everyone talks about how bad the O-line was, but the whole scheme as a whole and the tight ends, which in my opinion wasn't necessarily personnel, it was scheme. It was just not being aware of, okay, you got Cade Stover, a rookie in his 3rd game, blocking Jonathan Grenard. Okay, you got Dalton Schultz in the biggest drive of the year against Kansas City, down 8 in the divisional round, blocking Chris Jones and George Karlaftis back-to-back. That's the kind of stuff. So Nick Caley, tight ends coach, hopefully better scheme. But yes, I kind of just took off with your answer there, but I'm excited about the prospect of having Brevin Jordan and other tight ends contribute blocking in both the pass and run game.
Connecting it to another comment that I thought was very interesting from post the first day of camp, Caserio asked about Cade Stover. He said, quote, "You'd be hard pressed to find a player that's improved as much as Cade in the offseason," unquote. And Garrett, Caserio, you could say, oh, he was asked about him. He's trying to say something nice about him. But Caserio is not somebody that you would expect this kind of flowery comment about a particular player either.
And he kind of went on to say, basically, guys from year 1 to year 2, they finally get a first full offseason to really, bulk up and train year round, which as when you're a rookie, the training you do doesn't really prepare you for an NFL season. You're training for a combine. It's different. So, but I mean, since the moment we drafted him, there's been a number of times that Nick Caserio, it's no secret when he talks about Cade Stover, he is a big fan of him. And I think he called him a football playing Jesse. So he's the type of guy that is a football player. He played defensive end. I think he was more of like a stand-up, 3-4 defensive end at Ohio State for a while, and then also played tight end. So they like that he is just a football player, has the right mindset and mentality. And I would suspect Nick Caley is going to like that too. I think a lot of us had high expectations for him in year 1. Part of it you can blame on being a rookie, maybe some of it the scheme. But yeah, I'm excited. I know they're excited. So I would expect, good things out of Cade Stover.
What was the most frustrating storyline from day 1 of camp, and what did CJ Stroud change about his offseason? We're going to hit that in a sec, but hey, just want to ask our listeners, what are your Texans thoughts? What are you keeping an eye on during camp? What's your starting offensive line? Let me know in the YouTube comments. Hey, what do you think about this offensive line arrangement? Make sure you're subscribed as well on YouTube and getting our updates on your favorite podcast app. Drop us a quick thumbs up on YouTube as well. All right, Garrett. Christian Harris is still not practicing. It's a full year of this now. Is he going to make the roster?
I tread lightly with this topic because I know a lot of people love him, and I do too. And, there's a lot of emotional attachment, I Bleav, in that Browns game, the mic'd up viral moment where he had the pick six. And, it was a moment where Denico taught him something and they showed it, and then they showed it again when he made the play. But, he's a guy with a high ceiling, but, it's a lot of potential that hasn't been consistently realized, whether that's just developmental pains or being injured. So it's tough. Like the Texans right now, they signaled to us, some of the moves they made, mostly in particular firing Bobby Slowik. I mean, as bad as he was, they could have very easily tried to make a case to give him another year to keep, trying to figure it out. But they signaled to us, and D'Amico Ryans has told us, like, we're trying to win now. Like, we're greedy. Like, we're ahead of schedule than what anybody expected as far as this young franchise to compete. And so with that being said, it's the same message has been sent to other players like Dameon Pierce, who went out and got Nick Chubb. And so I think, when they went and signed EJ Speed, I've been preaching this. People just scoffed at, like, oh, he's special teamer. Like, no, like they got him in here to compete for a starting job. He was a starter the past 2 years. So yes, obviously they're very conservative returning guys from injuries. His injury was a mystery last year, but I'm of the belief, the fact that they are cautious. And last year, we never really knew. I don't think that they knew whether he was healthy or not. So, like, it wasn't really like they were misleading us. If you look at last year, he came back and played when guys were hurt. But then once, Azeez came back from suspension, and once Henry was on the field, and once the playoffs came, he didn't play a single snap on defense. He played all special teams. And people will say, oh, well, he wasn't healthy. He was back for like 4 or 5 games. I mean, yeah, I get you got to get into game shape, but at a certain point, like, if you're on the field, you're healthy, you're ready to play. So that to me, that's not really an excuse. Obviously now they can say, well, yeah, he hasn't practiced. It's a mystery. I could see them trading him. I hope it pans out because his potential is super high. But at the same time, if it doesn't work out the way we'd like, I feel more than competent with Henry To'oTo'o and EJ Speed in there. Yeah, and even I'm forgetting the name of the other. Jake Hansen is another guy that could give us some valuable reps. So, yeah, it's tough. Like, I hope it works out, but I could see a situation where he may get traded.
It basically comes down to the question. I mean, this is a perfect sort of irony of a wording here. Will Christian Harris be up to speed? And that's basically what
it's a great headline for an article right there.
CJ Stroud said he planned better and used his time intentionally better this offseason. I know what I thought when I heard him say that. Garrett, what did you think?
I don't know if the question asked was trying to ask about as far as, podcast, media tour, that stuff. Maybe he meant that. Like, maybe he realized, and I get it too. Like, you're younger, you're of this generation where, like, media, social media content's like, it's natural, streaming, podcasts, whatever. I can only imagine your rookie year, you're on cloud 9, you're like top of the world, and you get asked by people to do stuff, and you're like, yeah, he had a hard time saying no. Obviously, he didn't play as well as he wanted to last year, whether that's fully his fault or not. I mean, that's a different conversation, but I think there was some self-awareness. That's just like anybody. I mean, we're not dumb. Like, as much as they all want to say they're not tuned in and plugged into what's going on, he was aware of all the talk going on, and I guarantee you he knew, okay, it's different coming off of the Rookie of the Year campaign versus last year going on podcasts. People would be just roasting them and talking crap. So I assume that's what you were going to say.
Yeah.
I'm sure that some of it, like, he probably wouldn't admit it, but, I think he probably did make a concerted effort to kind of scale it back and then lock in. And I don't think that he didn't work hard last year either, too. I think it's just being out of the public eye a little bit.
And he's a quarterback, and what you want from your quarterbacks, learn from your mistakes and move on. And that's what he did this offseason. I mean, that's a big thing, right, Garrett?
Yeah, and, like, as far as, like, if like the mistake is being too much in the media, he was still doing the same stuff, doing trips. It was just less covered. It was less like appearances on shows, but, like, stuff gets out. It's like, it'll get blown up, but if he has another good year, I think he'll go back to going on more shows, but I don't think it'll ever be that level. I think it's just, the timing of it all. But yeah, he learned, he has good self-awareness, and it's a really, like, I wouldn't say it's a make or break year for him by any means, but, like, I guess in terms of, like, getting him back on track, to my opinion, of him being like a top 5 quarterback in that sense for the public's eye, he's still that level of talent in my eyes. Nothing changed. And I think that's what he wants too. He's worried about trying to win and advance in the playoffs, but he's definitely learned, I Bleav.
Yeah. And I don't mean it derogatory as though, it was a huge mistake that he did this, but he's definitely saying, I needed to plan better in the offseason and work better in the offseason, and it's something I needed to do. And he did it. And that's great. Great to hear. And 4 Texans defensive linemen are on the PUP list: Garrett, Derek Barnett, Foley Fatukasi, Kurt Heinisch, and Denico Autry. I'm not panicking about any of these 4, but Garrett, my leash is a little bit short on Denico after all the time he missed last season.
Yeah, I'm not worried. I mean, they're all veterans. This time last year, before the season, Denico Autry was a great signing, and we were hoping and expecting big things. And it was an underwhelming season relative to what he's done in the past and what he's capable of. And I couldn't help but notice this offseason when listening to guys like Brian Baldinger, Chris Long, guys that are experts in the trenches, when they talk about the Texans D-line, they all bring up Denico Autry. He's like, your favorite defensive lineman analyst's favorite, defensive lineman. Obviously last year with the suspension, and I can't remember if he was kind of banged up a little bit. He showed some flashes, but he didn't really, produce to what we hoped or expected him to do. And so I guess from that angle, it's concerning, but at the same time, making sure he's healthy is the biggest thing. And I will say too, Derek Barnett probably fits in that same boat as far as being a veteran, not too worried. He's proven what he can do, but I will say a guy that's not getting enough recognition on the D-line. Obviously, you got Will and Daniil, but Darrell Taylor, and he got some love today from Will Anderson Jr. in his interview. The signing from the Bears, he's a guy that could have had a lot more sacks last year, but he was just right there and couldn't quite finish some of them. But I'm excited about him, and I think the D-line will be great this year.
I don't know. I just find it odd when a guy is not coming off some major injury that we know about, or even a minor injury. Joe Mixon, we knew he was in the booth. There was, something that happened. It wasn't, I don't know if it was football related, but somehow he had hurt himself. So it's something that I expected. But when there are these guys that you don't see anything coming, and it's the first day of training camp, and you think, man, everybody's good to go now, Garrett. And then the guy is not there. He's not out there practicing. And especially if it's a guy that, the year before you're expecting so much from him, and he was not on the field. You mentioned the reasons why, but still that's the stuff that just, I find strange. That, that one and the Christian Harris stuff is like, what is going on with these two guys? Why can't we get them on the field?
No, that's absolutely fair. And, I guess who knows, maybe we'll find out in the coming days or weeks that there is something. Maybe he had a surgery, maybe he is hurt. Maybe it's something super minor and it's a chance for them, in the sense that they know what he is, and maybe getting other guys chance to get a better look at other younger guys. It's not a crazy concern at all, but I guess if it continues, another week or so, and we're almost halfway through training camp and it's still the case, then I personally would be concerned. But as of now, I'm not concerned, but it is a little peculiar, I guess you could say.
For the first time in 15 years, Jon Weeks won't be the long snapper. Caserio said he wants to see Weeks' jersey retired in the rafters, Garrett, but would you retire a long snapper who made one Pro Bowl? Is that a bad precedent for the Texans Ring of Honor?
That's a great question. I guess I never really thought too hard about it. Like when you hear Jon Weeks, you always just assume legend. I don't know. I mean, it would be hard to replicate. Like you wouldn't be setting a precedence to where, long snappers are getting in the Hall of Fame or Ring of Honor for your team that often. What was it? What did you say his career was? Was it 20 years?
50, I think 15 years with the Texans. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't want to say 20, but 15 years for anybody is a long time. So if we were to have another long snapper go that long, it would be much more down the road. So I would lean that I would be fine with it. It's, I didn't think about it, but that is potentially a somewhat controversial deal there. And I could see both sides, but I would be fine with it.
Yeah. It's just like somebody else comes along, they do 15 years and just say they're a fullback or something like that. And they had one, I don't know. It's just,
no, that's fair. I guess it's tough too, though, from a long snapper, because there's only one in the whole league. So it's kind of hard to really you don't have stats. So it's kind of hard to really measure, what their production was.
Yeah, he's likable. You might have a game where you honor Jon Weeks, or maybe you have the Jon Weeks Player of the Week that the Texans could award the special teams guy every week. I think that would be kind of a nice way to honor Weeks?
I'd be fine either way. That's a tough one. I hadn't really thought about it. It's a really good question, a really good topic. I know a lot of fans would really want it because he's just a fan favorite. But I mean, I'm indifferent on it. It's a long snapper.
Any final thoughts on the Texans camp? Anything that we missed, Garrett, that really caught your eye when you were watching all the coverage today?
Yeah, so shout out all the local beat reporters. They make it great for us fans to feel like we are there, even though we're not, which, I will be at some with the open practices, and I'm sure a lot of y'all will be too. But I noticed that the offense looked crisp, albeit first day, not pads, but there was a lot of completions. Obviously blocking in the trenches, you can't really tell if there's pressures or blowing plays dead, but it seemed to be efficient. And I guess also to tail end off of that, from observing from the press conference, D'Amico Ryans a couple of times in the press conference raved about how efficient the team was, especially in the communication roles, quarterback, Mike, linebacker, and gunners on special teams to relay, getting things in the right place. He mentioned, when you're doing off-season training and starting OTAs and you haven't done football in a while, that you kind of have hiccups kind of getting back in the groove, but he made it sound like it was seamless. So like the operations, I think he even mentioned like motions and stuff like that. And so something I had realized when I was watching the quarterback series on Netflix with the Falcons and Kirk Cousins in week 2 or 3 against the Steelers, Zach Robinson was their first time new OC from the Los Angeles Rams, just like we got with Nick Caley. And this offense, and Kirk Cousins was talking about it, and we've heard the same from the players as far as Nick Caley and the Texans offense, a lot of motions, pre-snap stuff. And so it can be a lot to kind of take in and remember. And that was the case in that series. The guy motioned too soon, but it was already going. And so when the ball was snapped, it hit him, and they picked up a fumble. TJ Watt did for the Steelers. So that kind of put a light bulb in my head, like, hey, like this is some complex new stuff. So prepare myself to potentially see some hiccups like that. And so far, so good to hear that it's not the case. So that would be another thing I would take away, the crispness of the operations as a whole, and the offense doing pretty well.
One of the things that, I saw on social media is some of the coaches and players, their quotes about, the offensive coordinator, Caley, and new offensive line coach, and the complimenting those guys. Some people were replying or in comments saying, sort of a backhanded slap at the OC and the offensive line coach. Did you feel like this was all a slap, or did you just feel like they're just being real kind to the new guys and trying to say some nice things about them?
Indirect. I don't think anybody is directly trying to do that. I mean, when you're asked a question, you answer it, and then whoever listens to it can take it the way they want. But it's no secret that Bobby Slowik was fired for a reason. And, that first press conference, D'Amico laid it out as to why, like, you need to be able to adapt and adjust. And then when they hired Nick Caley, that presser, everything they talked about was his adaptability and adjustability, how he will be able to adapt to his personnel and adapt to the opponents week to week, as opposed to the other way around of, making everything fit, what you want to do. And we've been hearing the same message the whole time from D'Amico. You heard it again today. And then when you hear from all these various players, that it sounds like it's different. And again, I know it's talk, but I do think there's a lot of truth to it. Like, and I noticed too with Nico, he was asked a couple times, or I had a couple answers that were kind of revolved around this topic. And Nico's like a nice guy, you can tell. And you could tell he was aware of this, and he was trying not to throw shade. And he's like, oh, there's shit. Like he made a concerted effort to make sure to do his best to make sure we didn't take it that way. And so that I thought that was cool. That was something I picked up on. So I don't think that anybody is intentionally trying to trash, last year's regime, guys that are gone. But at the same time, you can still praise and acknowledge what's different with this without doing that. But I mean, we all know why else would you fire the guy if it wasn't bad?
Yeah, it seemed like we needed some thought bubbles maybe above some of the coaches and players when they were making these comments, just so we know what they were thinking about when they were saying them. One last thing I wanted to do, Garrett, one of the guys that I really miss out at training camp, I know everybody misses, is Dale Robertson, 40 plus years with the Houston Chronicle and going back to the Houston Post. I just loved getting stories of the old days when he covered the Oilers. And if you got a minute, I just want to share a clip for everybody from one of my archives, one of the interviews that I did with Dale. And I asked him about what had changed from his Oilers days covering camp to the Texans days. I'll just say, hold on to your hat for these stories.
Bum Phillips training camps in San Angelo were about as loose and casual as could be. You needed to talk to a player, you just hung out in the dormitory. We actually slept in the same building as they did. You needed a guy, you waited after lunch, after dinner, you'd lounge on a couch, have a conversation. If I needed to talk to Bum, I just went over and banged on his door, and he'd open it and let me in. We'd sit there and watch film and film together and chit-chat. Let's just say it's a little more restrictive these days.
Bum started camp in late June, and tell me a little bit about why he did that.
Well, Bum loved horses, and of course spent the last part of his life as a horseman, as a real cowboy. He showed horses, and he rode horses, trained horses, but he had a lot of horses back in the 70s, and San Angelo is pretty good horse country, so he would just load up the animals and get out there, in his trailer, and he'd try to get out there in mid-June, set up camp, and in his downtime, he went out and played with his horses. So,
what's one of the crazier stories over the years that you can remember? Because there was always craziness going on with Glanville, and of course, Bum, it was less crazy but more fun, I guess.
Well, my two favorites, of course, unfortunately involve firearms. The Oilers, I'm going to say in maybe 79 or 80, had a camp picnic, and they had a big nose tackle by the name of Mike Stensrud, who went by the name of Mongo, which, of course, came from Blazing Saddles. And he had a bit of Mongo in him, and one night he maybe perhaps had that one too many Lone Stars, and all of a sudden Mongo is firing wildly in all directions. Players ducking under cover, and actually I won't mention the names in this other incident, but in a Huntsville training camp, one teammate actually pulled a gun on another. The night before the last day of training camp in 1980, the Oilers traded for Kenny Stabler with the Raiders and sent Dan Pastorini to the Raiders, right? Bum was thinking, you can't beat them, join them. The Raiders were the one team that seemed capable of beating the Steelers back in the day. So I think everybody may remember Snake Stabler, but he was a bit of a wild child, as was Pastorini, but kind of in a different way. In fact, my favorite all-time Kenny Stabler's quote was, "About the only thing I really like to do is play football and drive around in my pickup truck sipping whiskey out of a paper cup." Okay, and he said, and I got several ex-wives that never figured that out. So that's Kenny Stabler. Anyway, so there's a nightclub there called Friends. And, well, Snake made a lot of friends at Friends. I recall seeing him face down in the parking lot at about 2 in the morning. I go out to practice the next morning, and I might say at the time, this is probably interesting, that my bitter rival covering the Oilers was my dear friend and colleague today, John McClain. John was packing up to go home and decided to skip the morning practice. Went out to practice and noticed that there was no Snake Stabler on the field anywhere. So afterwards, I sidled up to Bum. I was the only reporter. Now, think about this. I was the only reporter at that practice. There was no electronic media. John was back in his room. It was just me. And I said, "Bum, what's up with Snake?" "He's sick. He's a little under the weather." I said, "Is this the kind of sick that's probably going to cost him a fine?" Bum said, "Yep." So, yeah, it's changed. It's a different world.
How about that?
That was awesome, man. Wow, you need to post that. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's some great stuff. Man, Dale always had those stories, but I mean the Oilers days, I mean Stabler, Pastorini, I mean one guy's out drinking and at bars or whatever, and not that Pastorini wasn't doing that, but he might be racing boats or doing NHRA drag racing in his spare time. He did that after he finished with the Oilers. So, the stories were fantastic. I'd interviewed him. We were standing out at Texans training camp when we had that conversation.
That's awesome, man. I think if there's more of that too, I think that's content people would really enjoy. That was awesome. I can't believe those. And it's crazy too how much it's changed. Like he said, like access. I guess it seems a lot more guarded now with, I guess people know that things can get out a lot easier.
Yeah. So if anybody is interested in those type of stories, and I'm always trying to post some of the older stuff just so people can find it. It's in the shorts. I sometimes post stuff, but also you can just go to our Houston Sports History playlist with some of the longer forms. These interviews talking Oilers and Texans and Astros, Rockets, all that sort of stuff. I just want to remind everybody before you get out of here, it's Texans Commenter on X. And I don't know, are you blessing or stressing? What's the deal? And what do you want to plug?
I'm big blessing, man. I really do think that this year, I'm an optimistic person in general, but I really do think that this is a year we can be a legit contender and make that next step and at least make the AFC Championship. I think it's an elite defense. I think it's the best in the league. I think it has a chance of being a historically great defense. I am a believer in the fact that the offense was really as bad as it was as a product because of mostly coaching and scheme from the OC and O-line positions, and those two will be rectified. I really think on offense, all we need is just an average O-line to be a legit contender, and I think we will achieve that. But as far as me, yeah, you can follow me at Texans Commenter or Houston Stressens. It's one of the two on any of the other ones. And I'll start writing articles more on my website, houstonstressens.com, and sending out the newsletter, free newsletter, more often if you want to subscribe there. But yeah, that's all I got, man. I appreciate you having me on as always. I'm excited, and thanks for sharing the Dale Robertson piece. That was pretty cool.
Man, you're one of the best things that has happened to Texans media in the last couple of years, I got to say. And, you came along when Stroud and Denico came along. So it seems like we got a whole package with all of you guys. And as always, just thanks for doing it. Appreciate the time.
I appreciate that, Robert. It means a lot.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.